Thanks for coming. We're right during the developer keynote, so I don't know if that means the audience is full of developers or not. So it's wonderful to be with you all today on day 2. How's it going so far? Yes, day 2 energy. I like it. Good. And the other thing, are we more excited about Benson Boone or Weezer? Okay, the young people are saying Benson. Both. I like that. I still don't know who's opening for who. I kind of thought Weezer would be the main act, but then a bunch of Gen Zs told me that that would not be the case. So anyways, great to be with you all. This is a picture of me from about 10 years ago, so you can just imagine I am perfectly preserved as that night now. We wanted to talk a little bit about work transformation. We're going to have some great panelists join me on the stage a moment ago, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time first just setting the stage. We did a study late last year, which we actually did a refresh on and will continue to refresh as well, really grappling with this question I think many people are asking, is like, when is the AI transformation coming? And what does it look like? And so we ended up doing, at the end of last year, 2,600 or so decision maker survey across a number of regions, the US, UK, Brazil, France, Japan, and India. And then we actually did sort of a boost, which is an update on it since the market's moving so fast, that we conducted between February and March. That was just in the US only. But anyways, all that to say, pretty good sample size, and we were able to learn a lot of really interesting things. Number one, what does actual AI transformation look like? Newsflash, it's not just like productivity gains or time savings. It's about innovation, which I think is actually a really good way to think about it. Companies want to be able to do new things. They want to be able to enter new markets. They have up until now been really constrained by headcount, by resources that they're able to put into these endeavors. So we found of the companies that are the most highly transformed, innovation was really the number one thing that they said was sort of the byproduct of that. The second was really around higher employee satisfaction. It's interesting, right? Because even there's been research recently done on all these developers that aren't writing code anymore, that are just directing outcomes. And they actually are enjoying it. It's really fun to sort of be able to sort of be a director of like 6 or 7 agents that are just doing all this work that would take you days or weeks. And then finally, company ROI and competitive advantage. I think there is going to be this moment where entire markets are going to have those that are adopting AI and truly starting to see results come much faster and those that aren't. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what it's like to be on a treadmill that just kind of keeps getting faster and faster competitively, and can you keep up if you don't adopt some of these tools. Now, the second thing that was kind of interesting is that we found of the spectrum, so if you look here, this is just really where people sort of netted out. Think about this as like the adoption cycle basically for highly transformed companies. Only 3% really were in that highly transformed category. So what does that mean? That means that 72% are still sort of in the early innings. So it's not a linear path, it's a spectrum. So I would encourage you, if you wanted to spend some time, we're not going to go through a lot more of the research here today, learning about what it looks like to be at each one of those stages. I would encourage you to do that. So if you fast forward to now, as I said, we did a refresh on the data. So the biggest question is like, wow, what has changed? So on the left, you'll see the findings from the US segment. So we basically, because we did the refresh just in the US, we looked at the original data just in the US, so it'd be apples to apples. And you'll see the data from a few months ago, and then on the right, you'll see our new findings. And now the changes between then and now, and I'm just going to look here because it's hard for me to read at this angle. People and organizations are already progressing towards impact. Scaling has nearly doubled for those who were in either the initial or exploring phases. And we saw a sharp decline in the amount of people that were just sort of in that early inning, just like purely exploring. And the shift towards progress is happening in less than a year, which means organizations are already moving fast. I think that honestly is my biggest takeaway, is that like people are moving around on this board very quickly. So just in a matter of 6 months, we're already seeing some shifts, even when we go back to the exact sort of same research group. It also means, though, that we've identified a new problem, which is that people are starting to get stuck at the scaling phase. We talked a little bit about that at the keynote of like, is this the year where you're going from pilot to production? And so what does it look like to sort of break through that scaling phase? And I think that's where we're going to have some great insights from our guest speakers today. So true transformation, I think, really does require specificity. When we talk to the organizations that got through the scaling hump, they identified 2 things as the key things that got them sort of over that. Number one, clear governance guidelines. This was really, really important. And then second, specific use cases and business outcomes rather than general time savings. So it turns out the more you get the practitioners in the organizations, the marketing teams, the finance teams, the HR teams, to start to think about the specific things they want to achieve, the business processes they want to automate, the new markets that they want to be able to enter, the new sort of competitive edge they want to have, and how they should think about AI and agents assisting in that, the better you are than just saying, we're going to write docs faster or write emails faster, that sort of thing. And highly transformed organizations have 5 traits. So if you want to know like the prescription to like getting to that, rarefied air of the 3%, number 1, it's about having a clear strategy and roadmap. That's pretty obvious, but need to be able to be very clear about what you're trying to achieve. Number 2, integrate AI into company culture. I would say this is a very, very important thing. People are using AI in secret because they think it's cheating. You have to dispel that right away. Like your leaders have to be loud and proud about how they were able to just get something done that they truly couldn't do before or that they couldn't do nearly as fast before because of AI. So being a role model for that, which goes a little bit into number 4 as well. Number 3, prioritize AI across numerous diverse tasks. Move beyond just the summarizing of stuff. How can you use AI to actually help with creation, with data analysis, other areas where you can start to really see high levels of sort of leverage by having AI involved. Number 4, advocacy in the organization. At Google, we have this program called Boost Bites, where we basically have folks from across the organization share in video form the things that they've been able to automate with agents or with AI, how they specifically have been able to do it within their jobs. This has been really, I think, influential throughout the company in terms of just the art of the possible. And we even do it on the things that you would think are a little bit like controversial. Like, here's how I used AI to write performance reviews for all of my direct reports. And they're like, oh, that's an option? That's great. And so I think it's really good to be able to role model this stuff and make sure it's part of the company culture. We also have a number of tools that we have provided as Google. So if you want to look up the Boost Bites program, we actually offer that externally as well. There's a bunch of videos, so you can kind of have that available to you as well in your organization. And then number 5, we want to sustain the investment in tools and training. This is just a really, really important thing. It can't just be a pilot. You have to, at some point, continue to invest and have this come across. Okay, so at this point, I want to invite up our 2 other esteemed panelists. So we've got Doug Gilbert, who's the CIO and CDO of Sutherland Global Services Incorporated, and Mike Meakin, a very fierce picture, love it, Director of Corporate Engineering at Robinhood. Welcome to the stage, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So I just gave your titles, but maybe you guys can give a quick intro of like what your day-to-day job actually entails. Mike, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. My name is Mike Meakin. I'm a director of engineering at Robinhood. I look after a lot of our corporate security and IT, our support teams, a lot of our corporate IT policy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and my name is Doug Gilbert. I'm the CIO and Chief Digital Officer of Sutherland. So kind of 2 roles, obviously any and all technology internally, where we're deploying assets and AI solutions with our internal employees. But also we do a tremendous amount of development and deployment of AI assets at other companies. And so the way that we typically like to say it is you are using some of our AI implementations in every single day of your life.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, guys. So we're going to do a couple questions. We'll have a lightning round, and then if we have time, we'll also take questions from all of you. So I thought I would just start with, easy one. Organizations tend to default to time savings when they think about the primary benefit of AI. What have you both discovered as your organization's primary benefit, and why? So let's start maybe with you, Doug.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give kind of 2 different answers here. Certainly time savings is important so long as you can objectively measure it. And so one of the biggest challenges we see within companies, they get very caught up, and I believe in the innovation for sure, but they get caught up into, we're going to make better decisions. Okay, what is the quantification or value of that better decision as a good example? And some of the just very objective ways that you can kind of look at these things and measure them and to really kind of say, hey, here's a quantifiable outcome or ROI I was able to get off of is time savings. So I don't want to kind of dismiss that point. But just beyond time savings, when we look at, we kind of look at AI a couple different buckets. One is the pure automation side, the other is the assist side. And that's really where we see the innovation occur at. we are seeing not only just a significant, about an average of 33 to 35% reduction in the speed of an answer or the speed of a task. But more importantly, because that kind of feeds back into the overall model, I won't get into the details of that, but that we call that neural knowledge. And so all of a sudden, if you've come up with a better answer and we're able to score that over time, that answer or that task is now available to everybody. That feeds into the model. So these things will give you a substantial improvement into task accuracy. Which then increases innovation, it creates creativity, but allows people, and I think a lot of times if you take people away from the mundane tasks, it allows them to kind of put their brain power to those more creative tasks and then use the power of things like generative AI to kind of assist in those endeavors. Just one last point is, through this, if you do fine tuning through this process and you do it properly, we see about a 300% improvement, and this is not our stat, this is just a general industry stat, a 300% improvement in task accuracy by doing fine tuning through this entire process. And so just any model that you put in place is gonna run 3x better than any kind of pre-trained model is substantial.
So if I'm just hearing you, it sounds like cycle time has become a very big part of how you've started.
Cycle time and accuracy. Remember, that's the other big factor there. So let's do financial modeling as a good example, right? The math and the way that's going to be able to do the formulas, it's going to do it significantly faster, but it's going to make less mistakes if you have trained your people properly to kind of how to reduce hallucinations. But again, it's also, like I said, when you're reducing this task on mundane tasks, like in vibe coding, the reason that developers love vibe coding is they're not having to do that sluggish work that's kind of everybody has to do, and nobody likes to build forms and everything. Everyone wants to build the engines and do that kind of cool stuff. So when you have vibe coding kind of doing all that sluggish work, it allows your brain to kind of work on that creative side of things.
Nice. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think time really is kind of a proxy for being able to do more. And so I think one of the things that we're really trying to focus on is not so much about measuring time saved, but what were the outcomes that you were able to deliver as a result of having that extra capacity? You know, what are the the new things that you've been able to drive? What are the business outcomes that weren't maybe achievable before with the scale of the organization you had or the team that you had? And so, like, time is important, but it's sort of a proxy for just being able to do more. I think the other thing too that we look at a lot is sort of time adjacent is where we're able to actually address a lot of risk. One of the things that we've seen a lot of opportunity from on the AI side is being able to reduce our exposure window by having our security teams move more quickly. So yes, we definitely want to eliminate a lot of that toilsome work and be able to have folks, focus on more complex, interesting problems. But also by being able to have them move more quickly, we're actually reducing a significant amount of security risk for our organization.
Awesome, very impressive. So one of the challenges we saw in the research was that, let's say, executive optimism tends to sometimes have a bit of a disconnect from the way people feel on the ground. How have you thought about that gap? How have you bridged that gap, if you have, in your organizations? So let's start with you, Doug.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the disconnect is massive. I mean, we always kind of look at market studies and stats. 87% of CEOs will tell you that AI is going to be the most transformative application or any solution they can put in for their business. 72%, along with that, 72% of CEOs now are the primary decision maker around AI projects. Yet Google's result shows a 97% failure. 95% of AI projects fail to deliver any ROI whatsoever, right? So there's obviously a massive disconnect between those two things. One of the causes, if you look underneath the covers, companies on average underestimate the cost of AI between 500 to 1,000%. Those are just massive disconnects. And so it's not that the AI fails. I think that people are looking at it very simplistically. Let me just take a pre-trained model, throw it in place, not put the rest of the governance around it that I need to be able to do. The number one cause of AI failures is the underlying data is not there to be able to support it. And so people will take a pre-trained model, throw RAG functions on there, expecting that's going to solve kind of some of the tasking issues that they're seeing. Yeah. While it will reduce hallucinations and it will give up-to-date current knowledge within the company, we have already acknowledged that you have underlying data structure challenges, and then you're just throwing a RAG function out there. And so what we see is companies are not thinking through kind of what it really takes to put these in place, like again, doing a fine-tuning process with RAG, as a good example, will improve the accuracy by 87%. I mean, those are just substantial numbers versus just RAG alone. So if you go just fine-tuning itself, you're already at 81%. If you add RAG on top of that, then you're another 5 to 6 points above that. And so it's kind of these hybrid models, putting them in place. And then the other big challenge that we see is when a project fails, and you had a lot of really good stats on there, kind of who's accountable for all these different things, who's accountable for something fails. And so some of the lessons that I think a lot of CIOs learned during large-scale ERP implementations, which is it can't just sit in any one box, right? It can't just sit with a CIO or the CFO or anybody else. It really takes the entire business coming together. I think it's the same disciplines that we need to kind of put back with deploying AI. It is a very complex technology. It is a transformative solution, and especially if it's going to impact the way that your business applications or operations are running. Just another scary stat that's kind of going out there right now is last year we had about 700 documented lawsuits against companies for misuse of AI. That'll be 2,000 by the end of this year. Last year we had 12% of Fortune 500 companies cite material weaknesses or have to state material weaknesses as a result of AI. That goes up to 72% this year.
Wow. Mike, what's your take on the gap?
I think it's much like any other technology. You know, we've all heard the stories of like the folks that are buying the things are not the same people that are using the things. I think one of the real key things for us in being able to kind of get past that senior leader optimism is being able to meet people where they're at, being able to actually find the folks who can help you evangelize a lot of the value that's coming from AI, not just at the executive level in terms of business outcomes, but in being able to make people's lives easier. And in order to do that, you have to actually be able to speak the language of the folks that you're trying to get to embrace this technology. So you have to find those folks in finance and in HR and in engineering. And you're always going to have those people that sort of gravitate to the new technology and kind of become those early adopters. You have to find those folks and you have to kind of enable them to be champions for some of the AI adoption across the organization, because the way that you're going to get people excited about AI is not by necessarily just having your leadership up on stage talking about it, but it's those peer conversations of someone sharing, hey, I solved this problem. I don't have this toilsome work anymore. I've been able to like automate away a lot of the grunge work that I don't like to do. And I can go back to focusing on the thing that actually gives me a lot of satisfaction in the job that I'm doing. But that's not going to come from the leadership team. That's going to come from finding those folks who you can enable and empower to be those champions across the company. That's where you're going to find that real adoption story. It's sort of a combination of like grassroots with those champions and those evangelists that are supported by the senior leaders.
And could you so is that a formal thing that you do, where you find those individuals and you put them on like an all hands, or like what structure do you put in place around that? Yeah.
So we've carved out time at our weekly all hands where our CEO gets up on stage and talks to everybody every week. There is now like a carve out there where we actually showcase a lot of the AI wins across the company, where folks are submitting and saying like, hey, this is a thing that I did, this is something that I've seen, this is how I've made an improvement. And we're giving everybody across the company the opportunity to come up and actually speak to the rest of the organization, to all of Robinhood, to share like, hey, this is what I've been able to do. This is a really cool thing that I built. And they don't need to be like really significant. It's really more about showcasing that everybody across the company is actually having the opportunity to do these things. The other thing that we do a lot of is, we have channels and comms where we're also showcasing those things. Yep. So just kind of like really giving people a lot of ways to surface the wins that they're getting.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we do a lot of that at Google as well, especially amongst the marketing team. And my very unofficial count is that almost everybody that gets on stage is like under 27. It's very interesting that like all of our most junior employees are the ones that, they're conserving energy. Let's put it that way. They are. So it's great to see, actually. Cool. So let's, again, revisit our spectrum slide a little bit. We've seen that a small percentage of the organizations consider themselves highly transformed, while others believe they're sort of in the early stages. The organizations that have found success share a lot of these traits that I talked about a moment ago. And so I think it's important for us to maybe talk about the first item, which is about having a clear strategy and a roadmap. So Mike, maybe you can talk about what that looks like inside of Robinhood.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I think, it would be a luxury if I was able to keep my, 1-year roadmap for the entire year. I think a big part of being able to be effective with launching some of these things is being extremely flexible. So you can kind of have your plan of like, this is where we want to get to, these are the technologies we want to adopt, these are the things that we want to deploy, but the pace of change is so wild and new things are coming out so quickly that anything that we came up with at the start of the year, we're having to make significant changes to and pivot in a lot of the ways, because just our expectations for what kind of capabilities the models would have, what kind of ways we would be able to integrate them into the services that we already have in our environment, all of those things are changing on like a daily basis. So I think as much as it's important to kind of have that guiding North Star of like, this is where we want to get to, this is what being AI native means for us, and kind of the steps in that journey that we see, you have to be super flexible because things are going to come out of nowhere, especially from a technological perspective. Like it's wild.
And maybe just on that point, do you guys embrace employees just going off and bringing their own AI, or do you have kind of a strict governance in place around what tools can be used? Because I would imagine if things are changing that fast, it's because there's a lot of like self-serve exploration, perhaps.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why we're having to actually move so quickly and make a lot of changes to how we envision this is to get ahead of that. We had some really great ideas about how we would kind of slow roll some of the adoption across the organization over a longer period of time and be able to kind of spend more time finding those places where there's a lot of value and focus on that. But you start to run into the shadow IT problem of folks going and solving problems themselves with the best of intentions. Right. But a lot of the places where we're seeing significant security risks is coming from non-engineers and non-security folks who are just trying to solve their problem, and the models are too helpful. Right? They're helping them in ways that we don't want. And so it's been really important for us to get the right tools with the right guardrails launched and out there in people's hands more quickly to avoid that shadow IT problem or shadow AI problem.
Totally. What about you, Doug?
No, I think it's fantastic points. There's a balance there for sure. I think we're a little bit advantaged because we're working so closely with many, many different large companies on implementing their AI strategies and kind of building their models out and doing their automation. And so a lot of the good ideas come from them. And we've got a tremendous engineering side of the house, which they have full reign because they're kind of their own separate siloed environment outside of the primary organization anyways. And their job is just that, is to be creative and be innovative and work very closely with our different customers. And as their customers, a lot of times they come up with some phenomenal ideas of how to apply this. We have this very specific problem, this is a problem, how do we apply it? And so the way that we look at this is kind of this almost like an incubation labs within our own development community. And then we'll look at it within our IT and back-end corporate, and then we'll look at it the rest of larger Sutherland, which is a much more locked down environment. So there is a trickle-down effect. I fully agree with the security and compliance risk there. I mean, we're providing services and process optimizations for very large companies, and so that's a lockdown environment. But that innovation is what's really kind of key. But more importantly from that, it's the biggest value is just not, hey, what is the coolest AI model? It's how am I going to apply it to a very specific set of business problems, and what outcome is that going to be able to drive? And so that business language that comes all the way through of we were able to put this into XYZ company, and we're able to drive this very specific outcomes, then that lets us look at industries differently, look at some of our internal processes differently.
Awesome. Okay, what about the second point, integrating AI into company culture? Doug, do you have a point of view on this?
Yeah, so we started up an AI Academy. And while I think kind of every company is doing that, and we kind of went the intent of like, hey, you have to kind of do this. A couple interesting things came out. Number one is we very much tied training and certifications to companies that you can work on projects that you can work on, and then your own bonus structure. And that had a massive effect where it wasn't somebody who's just kind of reading the screen and trying to pass a test and saying, hey, I took this kind of AI proficiency test. They're actually doing deep certifications with Google's and others. And then they get to work on, hey, I want to work on this kind of really cool project over here at Spotify as a good example. Fantastic, you kind of get the first right. So that kind of creates an AI culture. Number two is we do a tremendous amount of AI assist capabilities. And a lot of the roles, they get bonus structures. And so because you're improving their efficiency at the end of the day, they are massively embracing AI, whereas they're not fighting it. And the second part is we do a lot of human in the loop, because that's how we do reinforcement learning on the back-end models. And so they feel like it's part of the process versus, hey, I'm just kind of forcing you and trying to automate you out of the role. So because they're more efficient, they're actually getting paid more money. And for every single, the interesting stat that we came to be is, as we're kind of implementing AI across companies, and for every single 1 point that we saw in CSAT improvement, we saw 2 points improvement in employee satisfaction because the efficiencies are coming for them.
Wow. So just kind of moving on to the third point, I think, Mike, I'd love to hear from you on this one. Prioritizing AI across a diverse set of tasks. I'm curious, like, what is the spectrum inside of Robinhood in terms of, wow, I would not have thought that we would be using AI for this compared to this. Like, can you give us a little sense of some of the use cases?
Yeah, I think where we've seen a lot more adoption recently really has been in the non-eng roles. Robinhood has been pretty ahead of the curve for a long time on the engineering side with AI adoption and use of AI kind of baked into a lot of our SDLC. But I think what we've been doing this year, and in particular the last couple of months, is really actually pushing a lot harder on all of the non-eng use cases. And so we're seeing, a lot of parts of our business, particularly where there is a lot of review and where there's a lot of documentation and processing and things like that, and outreach. A good example is a lot of our vendor security assessments. When we're going to partner up with an organization, it involves a lot of analysis of a lot of documentation to be able to kind of assign, risk scores to some of our partners that influence sort of the way, the shape of our relationship. That's one of the places where there's a lot of back and forth with those vendors of trying to get the right information, get the questions answered that we need. There was a lot of human toil in that process of just engaging with them and getting the right documentation and going through and reviews. And that's one of the places where it's been a transformative change so far for us, is being able to turn a lot of those assessments and a lot of the security reviews around much more quickly. So it's something where, our folks on the business side who are waiting to, for a feature launch or a product launch where they have an organization that they partnered with, they're often having to wait for these things to complete before they can actually move forward and kick off their project. And so now they're able to actually get those going much, much more quickly. And so I think that those places are where we're seeing a lot of it. There's similar use cases on the finance side where, excuse me, being able to go and quickly get the data and aggregate it and answer the questions that you're looking for some of our finance folks across all of our services. The AI tooling there is much more about providing basically a translation layer between all of the different places and portals that they used to have to go to kind of get the information and handle that synthesis themselves. So being able to have that all automated for them means that they're focused much more on what are the decisions that need to be made as an outcome of this information, rather than having to go and glue all of those pieces together beforehand.
You talked about coding and engineering at the beginning, and I think we've all seen that they have definitely become early adopters of this technology. Do you think that's because AI is fundamentally better for coding tasks, or just because that population is very open to embracing new technology, and we could see just as much transformation in the other functions just as fast if we had that same mindset?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a little bit of that. I think, there's also the kind of the structure and the formality of coding lends itself, I think, a little bit better to being able to recognize what good looks like, which is really a lot of the skill in being able to leverage AI effectively. Is, okay, you can go and ask it to do these things, but is it doing the right things? And what you get at the end, is that actually what you were looking for? That's a really big part of being able to get that value out of it, is being able to, it's sort of like taste, right? Like, you can recognize when you're getting what you're looking for. I think that aspect of it is a little bit easier when it comes to coding, just because of the formality and structure of it.
That's very interesting. Okay, so moving along here, the fourth one is really around empowering AI advocacy throughout the organization. Doug, do you have a point of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hit on this a little bit earlier. It's again, because outputs of kind of tasks or work are directly related to rewards and bonus structures. The AI advocacy comes itself, right? I mean, these guys are wanting the AI, they're not fighting us for it. And what we get every single day is, hey, you guys have rolled it out to this program, can you roll it out to us? And so the adoption, once you kind of get over that initial hurdle and that fear factor goes away, it's amazing. And this is not just for us. I mean, this is across every single client that we put it in. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is, if you put an AI And again, the only thing you're talking about is just cutting resources and none of the benefits, right? Obviously, there's going to be a resistance of that, put in things like impermissible prompts and all those type of things, and you can guardrail things only so much. You really want them to get behind it, and so as long as you can create a kind of reward structure that closely aligns to the efficiency gains and creativity gains that you're going to see from AI, they will beg you for it. So.
Well, you mentioned a couple times now like a financial incentive.
Yeah.
Can you give any detail on that?
Yeah,
Like,
so
how does that work?
we did it years ago, and it's just, listen, if you're able to perform, let's say, 2 tasks per hour or 3 tasks per hour, and then you have somebody that's doing 5 tasks per hour, why not pay that guy more money, right? And so we did this entire career pathing and kind of control your own destiny, so to speak. And we are very clear, go take this certification, and then you can kind of do this type of work, and then, here's what the pay rate for that type of work is going to be. Wow. And so now all of a sudden, if you're only able to do 2 tasks per hour, and now you're able to do 6 tasks per hour, right? It behooves us to pay you more money. I mean, we're just substantially more efficient.
Wow, very cool. And last up, sustained investment in the right tools and training, such as focusing on having AI integrated within the existing tools and apps. What's that like at Robinhood?
Yeah, that's actually been a huge focus for us lately, is basically, okay, we have the AIs in everybody's hands. We have the models, we've launched Gemini Enterprise. We've got everything out there available for people. The value is really only going to be had once we can get folks to move past that, okay, I'm having a conversation, to now it can actually go and talk to all of the things that I care about. It can go and actually access all of our data lakes. It can go and talk to all of our SaaS services. Like, the real value that people are finding, particularly on the non-eng side, is once we actually connect all of these things together. And so what we've been investing a ton in is basically trying to build out MCPs and skills for all of the services in our company. And we've got, a prioritized list that's informed by a lot of folks, like social upvoting from our employees of what they want to see, what they want to use. And we're actually building and deploying those out in kind of a hosted MCP solution that's sort of part of our guardrails for this. But we're trying to get those out as quick as possible, because there's a compounding value add once you're not talking to these things in isolation, but you're able to actually bring all of these systems and all this data and all these services together and actually reason about it and actually have the models able to actually act on your behalf across all of our surfaces. So I think that's something that we're definitely investing a ton in right now, is actually the build out of that glue between services. And then coupled with that is a lot of actual training and development and hackathons and inviting speakers in, including from Google, to come and talk about, here's some of the things that we've seen in other organizations, here's some of the ways that our engineers are actually able to solve problems with these tools, just to get people excited about where other folks who are in similar roles, who have similar business problems, have already been able to get some value. And so that idea of kind of like, encouragement internally, a lot of support for formal training, for informal social hackathon style training, across the board. That's kind of like our overall model, is trying to get all of those touch points.
But it sounds like you spend a lot of time up front making sure that there's going to be tremendous value, because you have all the integrations and things like that. So then how do you translate that into training? Is that then become something that's discipline specific? Like, hey, finance team, here's now how you're going to be able to have these specific jobs to be done, like really accelerated, same for marketing, same for sales? Or are you focused on like horizontal value for the whole company?
So we kind of have broad strokes, like here's how we're thinking about these tools, here's the types of things that you can do, and then we have different lenses for different parts of the organization, where when we invite folks in or we do kind of focused working groups from those teams, it's much more through that specific lens, where it is the overall training is going to be functionally very similar, but it's sort of tailored a little bit more for each of those individual environments and use cases, where we can talk about, okay, the example that we used in this section actually now is going to be, very focused on a finance problem or an HR problem, but the overall structure of the curriculum is basically consistent.
Yeah.
If I can add just one quick point there. Yeah, so finance should be the one that's actually bringing you in and saying, hey, please automate this process, right? So that is the training by itself, because they're the ones kind of doing that innovation by and of itself. But number two, if I walk into a company and I want to look at a transformed company versus a non-transformed company, it's exactly what he just said. Is they're running a bunch of different MCP endpoints, and they're doing what's called inline AI. So it's a critical component of the workflow or the process itself versus what we call clunky AI, which is just, hey, I've deployed a tool and I'm copying and pasting from this tool to this tool, and I'm getting the outputs and I have to go put it in. That leads to AI fatigue. So there's a very clear difference in the way that companies are approaching these. The true transformative ones are doing exactly what he just walked you through. Hey, we're doing all this interface and integrations at the core level and making it a critical part of the process.
Yeah, I think moving from that bolt-on AI to the inline model is huge. And I think the thing that we are hoping to get to a little bit further is taking folks from that inline AI model even further to, okay, I'm not just using the AI now, but I'm actually building. I'm an AI builder. I'm actually like building and managing swarms of agents to solve problems that previously might have required entire teams. I think there's going to be a much smaller percentage of our organization that makes it all the way to that end of the path. But having our training and development kind of be structured around this learning path where folks can kind of move through these stages of the AI adoption journey all the way to the end also is helpful for us to be able to kind of recognize, okay, which parts of the business do we expect to get to which stage?
And sorry, I know we keep kind of bouncing off each other right this second. I love the word of swarm of AI agents. I think one of the other biggest challenges we see is, and I give it the example all the time, how many people do you have in your finance organization? You're not going to replace that entire different people have different skill sets. You're not going to replace that with one AI, right? And so Derek gave a great example about fraud. And that's the way, when we're doing fraud detection, is very different within the mortgage space versus the healthcare space versus the telecom space, et cetera. And then the agents that we're building, that's all it knows is how to detect fraud. Just like with your finance department, you have an AP guy versus an AR guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so really kind of think about these individual skills and then kind of linking them together for complex workflows is where you see success, and not just a monolithic AI kind of black box you're going to put in.
Yeah, that idea of kind of personas is also really helpful once you get to the point where you need to have a little bit more fiscal governance over the use of AI, where you can kind of start thinking about, okay, this is what I expect token spend to look like for this type of persona. We're not at that point yet, but I think kind of structuring it around that idea of like core personas across the business is going to be really helpful for us once we get to that point.
Fascinating. All right, so we have a lightning round for you guys. Do you have a personal favorite use case? Doug?
I love AI assist models. I love HITL models. I love reinforcement learning through human feedback models. Again, I just look at it as I'm helping the employee be more efficient. But most importantly, what you really start to learn is what human is best at doing what particular task? What is the best answer? How do I then govern and what's called promoting with DPO training is how do I promote that out of this, within a probabilistic model. So if you're talking generative, for one question, you can get 100 or 50 different answers, but what's the most accurate one that you want to be able to use? And that's where fine-tuning kind of comes into place. And so you kind of start to learn from the humans that are doing the work. Who is the best one at selling this process? Who's the one that handling this specific task? And that gets fed back in the model. That gets distributed to everybody. And so what we've seen is two different things. Number one is the amount of time it takes to train somebody has been reduced by about 50%. Why? Because the AI assist is going to help them real time on the job. Far better than what they're going to be able to do their own. And then number two is the AI assist is giving them, hey, they're assisting them with a task, and they're assisting them for the task, and they've been trained on the best human doing that particular task. So their efficiency rate and their productivity rate just goes up to the highest level very quickly.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I think one of the ones that stands out for me in particular is a lot more on the security side of things, where we have an agent now where we can feed it with details about a threat actor and TTPs and say, okay, generate like a synthetic attack. Like basically go through and using kind of what we know about this threat actor and the way they work and kind of create signals that will enable us to actually validate, do we have the right detections in place? And so this idea, synthetic attacks is not a new idea, but being able to start from, hey, we're just gonna actually tell you the type of threat actor that we want to simulate and understand if we're at risk and what that looks like for us. That's a novel thing that we didn't have before. And it's been a huge boon for our detection and response teams to be able to know, without actually being hit, how protected are we? What kind of coverage do we actually have, and is it doing the job that we expect? Because a lot of times, it's hard for you to know if you have the right detections in place until they start firing. Exactly. And when nothing is firing, is that good? I think one of those places where you can have a lot of anxiety around what your detection coverage looks like, and now being able to use agents to basically, red team ourselves through the specific lens of a specific threat actor that we're focused on it's first of all, it's really cool, it's exciting, but it's also been a real material benefit for us on the security side.
That's awesome. And I'll just indulge myself a little bit. One of the things that I have really enjoyed over the last year is I created a custom skill. So I basically had Gemini Enterprise look at all of my chats, my emails, my docs, everything. It's like, try to figure out the types of feedback that I tend to give when people ask me to review documents. In marketing, it's a lot of blog posts and things like that. And see if you can turn that into basically a README, like all the things that I consistently give feedback on, because I'm very repetitive, I think, a lot of the time, right? And it basically reverse engineered it into here are the principles of how Derek gives feedback, and turn that into a skill. And then it's something that literally anybody now, before they send me the email with the draft, they run it through the skill first, and it's the first line of feedback. And it's I've noticed the quality, some of the people who are in the room, thank you very much, have gone way up, at least, in my subjective view. And so it's been great to actually see even just something as small as that. And the fact that I didn't even have to spend time writing it, it just kind of inferred it from all of the context that it already has, which is kind of magic. Okay, what's one immediate action a leader can take to bridge this gap that we talked about earlier? Is there any sort of quick advice, Mike, that you would give to anybody in this room that wants to start to cross that chasm?
Yeah, I think you need to have adoption at the leadership level, and not in the sense of just talking about it, but actually using these tools and actually integrating them into the way that you're working, and then similarly, just like everybody else in the company, showcasing the way that you're actually using it. That adoption story at the executive level is super, super important. And I think the other piece that is really critical at the leadership level is the way that you have the optimism about AI actually feel authentic is by also being able to speak to some of the anxieties that folks have about job security and what does it mean for me? And am I, training tools that are going to replace me? And I think, for us, the story really is about sublinear growth and being able to do more with the same amount of folks and being able to actually scale our impact and deliver more value without necessarily having to grow our headcount. But that you have to actually be able to have that conversation. Otherwise, the optimism just feels thin and hollow. And I think, it's great to be excited, but also you have to recognize that we're in a moment in the world right now where there is a lot of anxiety about this. And I think it's important for leaders to actually be able to speak to that as well.
Yeah. What about you, Doug?
Yeah, my answer is a little bit nuanced. And I'm going to go back to some of those stats just because I want to make the point clear. Again, 87% of CEOs think it's going to be transformative for their company. 72% of them are now the primary decision maker on AI. Why is that? That's the scary stat, right? And that stat comes from that they don't trust the underlying team. 50% of those same CEOs think that they're going to be fired within the next 2 years if they don't properly implement AI. And so there's a massive disconnect even between the executive leadership and the boards. And so a lot of the work that we'll go do is put in North Stars, but that North Star is very simplistic. It comes down, and Derek mentioned this, is what is the value of an individual agent? If you can't quantify that to a financial level, then it's all very subjective. And so the biggest advice, I agree the tone of the top and the leadership, but it has to be very clear, pragmatic project management around we're going to go after this task and very objectively, measurably at the P&L level, we'll be able to influence the P&L by this exact amount. And the costs are going to cost us this, but the value is going to be here. Don't underestimate that cost, as I mentioned before, the 500, 1,000%, and don't just put in clunky AI because it's simply not going to get there. It has to be kind of that critical workflow. If you can get there, then you'll rise right to the top, and you'll be considered one that 95% of these same AI projects fail to deliver zero ROI. You want to get yourself in that 5%. That gives you the leadership position, and you don't want the CEO thinking that the tech team does not have the skill sets to be able to deliver it. And it's not that they don't have the technical skills or the capabilities. It's because they're not objectively measuring that at a quantifiable P&L level.
Wow. All right, last question. We've said time savings are the fuel, not the finish line. What do you think is the ultimate strategic prize? When we come out the other end of this in days, weeks, months, it's all happening so fast. What do you think is the big prize that organizations are looking for, going to be able to achieve, Mike?
I think the exciting part is that we don't really know. I think, especially as we start to push these things and drive the adoption in parts of the business that historically have not been at the forefront of technological innovation and getting kind of outside of that eng focus, I think there's a lot of things there that we're going to be surprised by, and a lot of ways of working that have yet to actually be discovered because the folks that were actually putting the tools in their hands haven't had the opportunity to change the way that they work fundamentally in this way before. We've had a lot of technological shifts over time in engineering, like new stacks and new ways of working. That's sort of like the normal mode, is that there is a shelf life to your expertise on the eng side. Yeah. But I think now we're actually driving these things across parts of the business where these fundamental shifts have not been felt before. And so I think I'm really excited to see what are some of the outcomes that we're going to get that we can't anticipate, because those folks actually haven't been able to change the way they work in this way before. Mm.
I'll try to be brief here. I know we're out of time here.
You have 41 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's very difficult, but once you get that 5%, the speed of movement and the speed of transformation those companies undergo is amazing. Yeah. And so what we've seen is when the companies have properly adopted it, they rise quickly to the #1 position within their markets, and everybody else is trying to catch up at that point. And they have about a 2-year time advantage window. So
yeah. Well, I just want to, first of all, thank our panelists, Mike and Doug. Weren't these guys awesome?